6 hours before the zombie outbreak, I, Lucy, a poverty-stricken student, successfully took over a small convenience store on campus that was on the verge of bankruptcy and transformed it into a fully fortified Doomsday survival base, because being poor drove me to take risks, including signing up as a volunteer for a municipal research institute where a single injection of an experimental serum could earn me 6,000 yuan, an experience that also led me to meet Alice, a gentle and kind testing technician who would unknowingly become the trigger for everything that followed. Welcome to Panda's Storyboard. Put on your headphones, get cozy, and settle in. Let's enjoy this story together. If you like it, don't forget to subscribe and give the video a like. Now, let's begin. At 3 o'clock in the early hours of last night, she suddenly sent me a message saying, "Lucy, we've discovered a new type of gene virus infection. Once symptoms appear, the virus completely takes control of the brain's neural system, turning people manic and bloodthirsty. And the process is irreversible. Stock up on supplies at school as fast as you can, and protect yourself." For the past several days, local news and social media had been flooded with reports of suspected rabies patients biting pedestrians in the streets, and sudden attacks on medical staff by violently agitated individuals. And although I had already felt that something was deeply wrong, because rabies, no matter how dangerous, would never erupt in such a concentrated manner in such a short time, nor would it cause people to tear into others of their own kind, Alice's warning confirmed my darkest suspicion. This was not rabies at all, but a zombie virus. The fact that even an ordinary lab technician was willing to risk everything to secretly warn me meant that the spread of the virus was already teetering on the edge of complete loss of control. And if this trend continued, zombies would begin to multiply exponentially throughout the city by this afternoon at the earliest, or by tomorrow at the latest, at which point everything would truly be beyond saving. I had less than half a day's head start compared to everyone else. Barely enough time to solve the four most critical survival problems, and as a rural student who survived only by juggling work-study jobs, there was no way I could accomplish all of this alone, which meant I had to find reliable allies, and fast. After rapidly organizing my thoughts, I grabbed my phone and called Jacob, and although his voice was still hoarse with sleep when he answered, the urgency and gravity in my tone made him ask no questions at all. He simply said, 10 minutes, meet downstairs. 10 minutes later, Jacob appeared on time at the dormitory entrance, dressed in a simple t-shirt and jeans, his eyes clear and alert, without a trace of drowsiness. And I immediately told him everything in one breath. Alice's warning, my own analysis, and the imminent risk of a full-scale outbreak, before locking eyes with him and asking directly whether he was willing to trust me and form an alliance. Such words would have sounded childish or delusional to most people, but Jacob was different. Like me, he had come from a rural background and clawed his way forward through poverty by relying on resilience and a clear mind, so he understood my caution and trusted my judgment, never doing anything without certainty. And after listening, he barely hesitated before calmly asking what the next step was. I told him that we needed to take over the campus convenience store and convert it into a defensive base, explaining that since a large supermarket had opened nearby, the small on-campus store's business had collapsed. Its staff consisted entirely of work-study students like me, who handled night shifts. And the owner had long wanted to transfer the shop, but hadn't finalized anything due to the price and the approaching summer break. Compared to cramped dorm rooms with zero defensive capability and the immense difficulty of hauling supplies upstairs, the convenience store, with its larger space, storage rooms, independent backyard, and relatively secluded location, was by far the most ideal survival point. Right in front of Jacob, I called the store owner and stated plainly that I wanted to take over the shop that very morning for $20,000, to which he replied impatiently that if I could get the money together before 8 o'clock, he would prioritize selling it to me. Otherwise, he would sign with another buyer at noon. After hanging up, Jacob showed no hesitation at all and immediately said he would go raise money, while telling me to contact trustworthy people on my end, agreeing that we would meet at the store entrance before 8. And with that, she turned and sprinted toward the men's dormitory. At 7:12 a.m., with 6 hours left on the countdown to the zombie outbreak, I returned to the dorm and slapped awake my 5 roommates, bluntly explaining the virus leak, the bloodthirsty and deranged nature of the infected, and the urgent need to pool money to stockpile supplies, while deliberately withholding the plan to take over the store, because until I knew who could be trusted, revealing all my cards would have been foolish. As expected, aside from the gentle Cecilia, who said she was willing to believe me, the others were filled with doubt, with class monitor Kira rubbing her eyes and casually suggesting that since there was no official announcement yet, it might all just be rumors, and that perhaps we should vote on whether to pool money or act individually, an idea the other three quickly supported as fair. I nearly lost my temper, shouting that by the time they finished voting, even if they weren't bitten to death, they would starve instead, because every minute mattered now. But Kira snapped back that as a poor student I had no right to talk big, questioning how much I could even contribute, and arguing that storage and distribution needed to be discussed properly. Bonnie chimed in as well, saying she was still debating whether to stay in the dorm or go home, and felt it was safer to prepare on her own, while the remaining two said nothing, but made their distrust clear through their guarded stares, fearing that I might take advantage of them under the pretext of stockpiling supplies. A chill ran through me at the absurdity of it all, because trying to explain a survival crisis to people who had grown up pampered and sheltered was like talking to a wall. They would never understand that when disaster strikes, notions of fairness and dignity become worthless. And I was only grateful that I had already decided to take over the store, because being trapped in a dorm with people like this, even with supplies, would make survival uncertain. Without further argument, I pulled out videos I had saved of frenzied patients biting people in the streets, and showed them to Beatrice, the only wealthy art student in the room, telling her that I would ignore the others, and that if she trusted me, she could hand the money over for me to manage, while contributing less labor, since I would handle all arrangements. And after carefully watching the footage, and hesitating briefly at the mention of less work, she finally nodded and transferred the money on the spot. After packing essential belongings, I left the dorm with Cecilia and Beatrice, both of whom called their families to warn them to stock up and stay safe, while also asking for extra funds, while I only sent my father a short message, telling him to store food and water and avoid going out, refusing to call, because the last time I had begged my parents for medical money, they had scolded me for being disobedient and said that being sick without money was my own fault, an experience that made me swear I would never ask them for anything again. When we reached the convenience store, we saw Jacob waiting with two others, Hashim, a slightly chubby sci-fi fanatic who held a Captain America shield model and wore an Iron Man helmet, quiet but extremely handy, and Ben, a mechanical enthusiast hauling a suitcase of electronics and a drone, whose knowledge of circuits and machinery was encyclopedic. Jacob told me that together with their savings and family support, they had raised $8,000, which, combined with the funds from Beatrice and Cecilia, brought the total to nearly $28,000, enough to take over the store and begin stockpiling supplies. And at exactly 8 o'clock, the owner arrived, briefly surprised to see a group of students, before unlocking the door and proceeding with the transfer. While Cecilia, Jacob, and Ben inventoried the shelves and second-floor storage, I handled the paperwork, discovering that, although the shelves held mostly snacks and drinks, the storage room contained an unused engine, 5 barrels of diesel, and an electric cargo tricycle in the backyard, all of which the owner agreed to include in the deal for $21,000, sealing the contract and leaving in a hurry. Holding the keys in my hand, I finally felt the weight on my chest lift slightly, because we now had our own survival base, and at 9:14 a.m., with 4 hours left before the outbreak, we launched into a race against time, dividing tasks so that some of us procured supplies, others sold off non-essentials to raise cash, reinforced defenses with steel shutters, mesh, bulletproof glass, solar panels, and electrified walls, and prepared not only to fend off zombies, but, more importantly, to defend against people, because in the bedroom the most dangerous threat would never be the undead. To survive long-term, self-sufficiency was essential. I first walked into a building materials store and placed an order with the owner. 300 bricks, 50 bags each of cement and sand. These materials would be used to build planting beds in the backyard. Next, I found an agricultural supply shop in the market and purchased 20 bags of nutrient soil, 20 bottles of organic fertilizer and fermentation liquid, along with 500 grams each of fast-growing Chinese cabbage, baby bok choy, corn, radish, and tomato seeds. I also bought 3 bags of fertilizer, 3 hose, 2 shovels, and 20 large water storage barrels. With these, we could convert human waste and kitchen scraps into organic fertilizer, collect rainwater in the barrels, and rely on fast-growing crops. The first batch of vegetables could be harvested in about 20 days, and the corn would mature in 2 months. No matter how much supplies we stockpiled, one day they would run out. Only continuously growing crops could provide lasting security. Besides food and water, defensive tools were also indispensable. At a hardware store, I selected 3 rechargeable chainsaws, 10 extra-long rechargeable telescopic branch saws, and 6 machetes. Normally, these could be used for maintaining the garden and processing wood. In emergencies, they could also serve as weapons against zombies or intruders. At a nearby hardware shop, I bought 2 folding ladders, 10 bundles of electrical wire, and several rolls of iron wire. After checking the purchase list to ensure nothing was missing, I repeatedly emphasized to the shop owners that everything had to be delivered to the campus mini-mart before 11 a.m. and paid extra for expedited delivery. Only after finishing all this did I finally breathe a sigh of relief and take a taxi back to school. At 11:44 a.m., zombie outbreak countdown, 1.5 hours. When I returned to the mini-mart, just as I was about to catch my breath, I realized the situation was worse than expected. Jacob and Cecilia had already returned from shopping. Supplies were piled everywhere, filling the room to the brim. The storage area couldn't hold everything. Most of it was stacked at the shop entrance. The 2 of them were drenched in sweat, trying desperately to rearrange things. Hashim and Beatrice had managed to sell off most of the excess supplies, but because they were busy collecting money, they hadn't contacted enough water suppliers. They only managed to get just over 20 barrels of bottled water, far from enough for 6 people long-term. Ben had already contacted installation workers. The iron gate, security bars, and solar panels were mostly installed, but the workers responsible for building walls, raising the perimeter fence, and installing the electric grid suddenly couldn't come due to personal matters. I quickly opened my phone to browse the latest news. Large numbers of suspected rabies patients isolated. Isolation wards at A10 hospital fully occupied. These 2 topics dominated the top trending searches. Nearby cities were reporting similar cases. Many netizens speculated it was a new type of virus, but such comments were deleted almost immediately. The situation was extremely dire. The zombie virus could erupt at any moment. We had no time to waste. I immediately reassigned tasks. Beatrice, stay here and keep calling water suppliers. Get them to deliver water as fast as possible. Ben, Hashim, you 2 ride the tricycle and go door to door to every nearby supplier. Get as many barrels of water as you can. Jacob, Cecilia, you 2 help me dismantle all the display racks and shelves to clear space for supplies. Everyone sprang into action. As we dismantled the display racks, deliveries from the building materials and agricultural stores began arriving one after another. I directed the workers to stack the bricks, cement, seeds, and tools in the backyard, then rushed back inside to help clear shelves. During this time, many students passing by the mini-mart saw us working frantically and selling off supplies at the entrance. "What are you doing? Is the store going out of business?" someone asked. "No, we're renovating it into a hair salon," I replied casually, then subtly added, "I heard online that a new outbreak might be happening in the city. There could be lockdowns. If you have time, it's better to stock up on food in your dorm." Some students immediately ran toward off-campus supermarkets. Others smeared, thinking I was spreading rumors, and walked away. Class monitor Kira also came by. Holding a few books, she stood at the entrance with a dark expression, watching us for a while. Her gaze was complicated. In the end, she said nothing and turned away. Seeing the books in her hands, I suddenly remembered that in the apocalypse, when phones lost signal and power, without any mental support, people could easily collapse. I quickly pulled out our 6 library cards and stopped a passing student. "Could you help us? Go to the school library and borrow as many books as you can. Novels, essays, science, practical skills, anything. Here are the library cards. This is for your trouble." I handed him 200 yuan. The student froze for a moment, then, seeing we weren't joking, took the cards and money and ran toward the library. At 1:25 p.m., a piercing scream suddenly erupted near the school gate, not far from the mini-mart, followed by the chaotic sound of people fleeing. "Help! Don't come closer. Stay away from me." My heart clenched. I ran to the entrance and looked out. Several people had tackled passing students to the ground, biting them frantically. Their movements were stiff and twisted, eyes hollow, mouths smeared with saliva and blood. The zombie outbreak had begun. At that moment, Ben and Hashim were unloading newly collected water barrels at the entrance. Both of them froze in terror, unable to move. "Get inside. Forget the water." I rushed out, grabbed them, and dragged them into the store. They snapped out of it, dropped the barrels, and ran inside with me. Jacob glanced toward the school gate, his face grim. Suddenly, he mounted the electric tricycle. Pull down the iron gate now. Then, Hashim, go to the backyard and clear space. Open the back door for me. What are you doing? I panicked, sweat pouring down my forehead as I grabbed the tricycle handle. It's full of zombies outside. It's too dangerous. Forget the supplies. Get inside. Jacob had already started the engine. He twisted the throttle and shouted back. There's another batch of supplies still on the way. I'm going to get them. Before I could stop him, he sped off. Jacob. I reached out, grabbing nothing but air. The others hurried to pull down the iron shutter. It slowly descended. I ran to the backyard and desperately moved the cement bags piled near the door, my chest tightening painfully. How could she be so reckless? In a situation this dangerous, still worrying about supplies? Ben and Hashim rushed over to help. Soon, the backyard entrance was cleared. I yanked the door open and stared anxiously outside, but there was no sign of Jacob. Seconds crawled by like centuries. My palms were drenched in cold sweat, my mind filled with terrifying thoughts. What if he ran into zombies? What if something happened to him, just when I was about to break down? The tricycle appeared around the distant corner. Jacob came racing back, several roaring zombies chasing behind her. Move aside, he shouted. I quickly stepped away. Jacob drove straight into the backyard. Ben slammed the door shut, and I rushed forward to lock it. Bang! Seconds later, the zombies slammed into the door, pounding and biting at it wildly, their growls echoing nonstop. Leaning against the door, I gasped for breath, tears uncontrollably streaming down my face. Jacob climbed off the tricycle and walked over. He raised a hand to wipe my tears, hesitated, rubbed his hand on his clothes instead. His face flushed slightly. Don't cry. I'm fine, he said hoarsely. I ran into a few zombies right away. Tried to lead them away, but they were too fast. Luckily, I made it back. That only made me angrier and more shaken. I wanted to scold him, but Cecilia handed him a tissue. Jacob, wipe your sweat. Your hair's soaked. I took the tissue, wiped my tears hard, and turned back into the store. Now wasn't the time for emotions. We urgently needed to confirm our defenses and inventory. I carefully checked all the doors and windows on both floors, ensuring the iron gate and security bars were firmly installed. Then I drew all the curtains to prevent zombies or people outside from seeing inside. Next came inventory. Jacob's food purchases were more than sufficient. 300 boxes each of instant noodles, vermicelli, and self-heating rice. 200 boxes each of canned meat and canned fruit. 100 boxes each of self-heating hot pot, bread, and sausages. 80 boxes of jerky. 80 bags each of rice, flour, potatoes, and soybeans. 50 boxes of salt. 40 boxes of soy sauce and seasonings. 20 boxes of peanut oil. Looking at the mountain of supplies, I felt a deep sense of security. This was enough for 6 of us to live for 1 to 2 years. If the virus wasn't controlled by then, our garden would be producing vegetables, and the chicken coop would provide eggs. We could basically become self-sufficient. In terms of daily necessities, Cecilia had been very thorough. Besides toiletries and toilet paper, she'd also bought a large supply of sanitary pads, day use, night use, and extra-long night use. Water supplies were also considerable. Combined with what Ben and Hashim collected, we had over 500 barrels, enough to last a long time. Just as I finished inventory and relaxed slightly, my phone vibrated. It was a message from Kira. First came a transfer of $10,000, then a message, I'll find a way to come to the convenience store later. Remember to open the door. I couldn't help laughing. I replied, what do you need? She replied instantly, didn't stock much supplies. Let's partner up. Forget it. Looking at those words, I felt a wave of sarcasm. Asking for help while acting so superior, ridiculous. I immediately returned the transfer. Kira replied at once. What do you mean? Nothing. Our supplies are only enough for ourselves, I answered. Her messages flooded in, each more hostile than the last. Lucy, you've gone too far. We're classmates. Are you really going to watch me starve? You're so stingy. Typical rural mindset. You think this virus will last long? When it's over, see how you survive on campus. Fine. If you're this selfish, I'll get the whole school to surround your mini-mart. Let's see how sturdy it is. Not talking now? Just wait. If this had been before, I might have felt hurt or angry. Now, I felt nothing. When my mother forced me to drop out of school to work and support my younger brother, she said far worse things. I'd long since built immunity. I didn't take Kira's insults seriously, but his threat to rally the entire school against the mini-mart was something I couldn't ignore. I knew he'd do it. Sure enough, the class group chat exploded. Kira smeared me relentlessly, tagging me repeatedly. You knew the virus leaked and deliberately didn't tell anyone. You secretly took over the mini-mart and hoarded supplies. So selfish. Open the store and distribute supplies to everyone. We didn't stock anything. We won't last days. Poor people are twisted, trying to get us all killed. My mom was right. Never befriend rural people. I'd rather be bitten by zombies than deal with someone like her. Stop talking. Once the zombies pass, we'll just rob the place. Meanwhile, my friend requests exploded. Classmates and strangers alike, all filled with insults and threats.
Cecilia sat beside me,
Face pale, restless. Lucy, will they really come and rob us? They will, I said firmly. Once hunger drives them to the limit, they'll go insane. Then, what do we do? Should we give them some supplies? She asked fearfully. Absolutely not, I snapped. Once we start, they'll push further. They won't stop until the store is emptied. In the apocalypse, you can't play the saint. We worked too hard for these supplies. Jacob glanced at the group chat, his face darkening. They're insulting you like this. Aren't you angry? I stood up, grabbed a folding ladder and a shovel. Anger is useless. Better spend the time reinforcing defenses. Let's go. We need to raise the backyard wall and finish the electric grid. The backyard wall was only just over 2 meters high, easy for zombies or people to climb. If we didn't reinforce it, not only would we lose our garden and chicken coop, it would become a huge safety risk. Jacob and Ben each took a chainsaw and guarded the backyard entrance, carefully peeking through a crack. Fortunately, there were no zombies or people outside for now, only distant howls. I'd worked construction during school breaks before and learned masonry from the workers. With bricks and cement ready, raising the wall wasn't difficult. But the electric grid stumped us. We lacked proper equipment and knowledge. Jacob paced the yard, frowning, clearly thinking hard. Just when we were at a loss, a sudden clatter rang out as Hashim accidentally kicked over a pile of metal racks, which were the metal strips and panels we had dismantled from supermarket shelves earlier that morning. And in that instant, a spark of inspiration flashed through my mind as I turned to look at Jacob, realizing there was a solution, while Jacob also reacted at the same time, his eyes lighting up as he understood my idea. We could embed the metal strips vertically into the brick joints, connect them together with iron wires, and run electricity through them to form a simple electric barrier. And with the plan settled, we immediately got to work, with me handling the cement and mortar, while Jacob assigned tasks. Lucy and I climbing ladders to build the wall and embed the metal strips. Cecilia and Beatrice passing bricks, metal strips, and cement from below. And Ben and Hashim cutting iron wires to suitable lengths, so they could later tie them to the metal strips and connect everything to the solar battery panels once the wall was finished. Just as I was about to climb the ladder, a panicked cry suddenly came from outside the wall, shouting for help, and my heart tightened as I dropped the bricks, grabbed the branch saw leaning against the wall, climbed up the ladder, and peered over the wall, only to see a zombie pinning a male student to the ground and savagely tearing into his shoulder, his face covered in blood as he cried and struggled desperately, moments away from being bitten on the neck. Without time to think, I extended the branch saw and swung it down hard at the zombie's neck, and with a sharp crack, the blade sliced cleanly through, sending the zombie's head rolling onto the ground, leaving the boy frozen in place as he stared at the severed head, then up at me on the wall, his eyes filled with terror and gratitude. I shouted at him to leave immediately and warned that if he ever dared to come back to steal supplies, the next head I cut off would be his, and only then did he snap out of it, kick the zombie's corpse away, and scramble off in panic. Lowering my gaze to the severed head on the ground, I felt an eerie sense of familiarity as I realized she had once been a work-study student at the school just like me. Someone who had worked at the small supermarket to save money, often eating nothing more than a plain steamed bun and a cup of water for dinner. someone who had tried so hard to gain a foothold in the city and change her fate through studying, yet had now become a mindless creature that could only bite and tear. The thought churned violently in my chest, my stomach turning as I climbed down the ladder and retched uncontrollably against the wall, until Jacob rushed over, gently patting my back and telling me that she was no longer human, but a zombie, and that killing her had been a release rather than cruelty. Squatting on the ground, I looked up at him with reddened eyes and asked him to remember that if one day I ever became a zombie, he must give me the same release. Because in the apocalypse, the living were not necessarily happier than the dead, and no one knew whether the next second would bring infection or transformation into the very thing we feared most. Jacob froze briefly before his gaze hardened with resolve as he told me it would never happen, that he would never let me become a zombie, and that he would protect me no matter what. And after wiping away my tears and steadying myself, I told everyone to stop dwelling on it and get back to work so we could finish the wall and electric fence as soon as possible. In silence, everyone returned to their assigned tasks, with Jacob and I climbing ladders to lay bricks and embed the metal strips vertically, Cecilia and Beatrice efficiently passing materials from below, and Ben and Hashim organizing the iron wires until the wall was raised to over 4 meters high, nearly the limit of what the ladder could reach, after which Ben densely tied the wires onto the metal strips, connected them to the solar panels, and hung up a handwritten warning sign reading, "High voltage electric fence, no entry." The moment the power was switched on, the wires emitted a faint buzzing sound as an invisible barrier rose between us and the dangers outside. And by the time we returned to the supermarket, it was completely dark, with the shutter outside occasionally shaking under zombie impacts and roars. Yet, we were no longer as panicked as before, because we now had solid defenses, sufficient supplies, and companions who trusted one another. And as long as we stayed united, we believed we could survive this apocalypse.
Before going to sleep,
We agreed on night watch rotations, with Cecilia and Jacob taking the first half of the night, Hashim and me taking the second, and Ben and Beatrice acting as backup. And at 7 the next morning, the second day after the outbreak, I woke up on time to find everyone else already awake and sitting on their bedding in a daze, clearly having slept poorly after the horrors of the previous day. After a simple wash, we ate breakfast consisting of instant noodles and a sausage each, and although our supplies were sufficient, we still decided to ration carefully, since no one knew how long the apocalypse would last, after which Ben suggested using the drone to survey the outside and check zombie distribution and possible survivors on campus, a proposal everyone agreed to. Carefully opening a narrow gap in the curtain to ensure no zombies were nearby, Ben quickly released the drone, whose live feed showed many zombies wandering aimlessly near the school gate, pacing, howling, and occasionally lunging at objects, though our fortified supermarket did not attract their attention, which Jacob noted could actually help deter people who might otherwise try to loot us. As the drone flew over the basketball court, football field, and teaching buildings, bloodstains and scattered belongings were visible everywhere, with only a small number of zombies roaming, likely because the outbreak had been so sudden that most people had hidden in dorms and classrooms. But when the drone reached the dormitory area, it was spotted by people standing on balconies, prompting Ben to quickly withdraw it to avoid trouble. Checking the latest news, we learned that the virus had been officially named the Z virus, with City A confirmed as the source, and footage showed cities in ruins, wrecked cars lining the streets, alongside corpses and wandering zombies. Despite lockdowns, the spread far exceeded expectations, with neighboring cities and even other countries reporting similar outbreaks, leaving online discussions heavy with despair, as people realized this might be the beginning of a global apocalypse. While everyone else hurried to call their families before communications failed, fortunately, learning their parents were safe and had stocked supplies, by the third day, the school officially lost water and power. Yet contrary to my fears that this would drive desperate people to attack us, events unfolded differently. When the boy I had saved exaggerated his experience and spread rumors that the supermarket gates were unbreakable, the backyard electrified, and that I was a chainsaw-wielding maniac more terrifying than zombies themselves. Overnight, those who had cursed and threatened us in group chats abruptly changed their tune, begging for forgiveness, food, or offering money for instant noodles. But I ignored them all, unwilling to be either a savior or a disaster profiteer, caring only about surviving peacefully with the companions who trusted me. even when Cecilia hesitated in sympathy. Because once you give in, it never stops, and mercy in chaos is often cruelty to oneself. In the following days, we settled into a routine of rotating watch shifts, organizing supplies, maintaining defenses, planting fast-growing vegetables in the backyard, and even preparing a chicken coop, believing that survival in the apocalypse required not just courage, but calm thinking, cooperation, and the will to keep building a future amid the ruins. The aunt walked over to the chicken coop and picked up the eggs from the ground one by one, while the uncle used a flashlight to carefully inspect each egg. And in the end, they packed the selected eggs into a plastic bag, placing that piece of paper inside as well. Ben maneuvered the drone and hooked the plastic bag onto it, and we eagerly opened the bag as soon as it came back, finding more than 20 eggs inside along with a note that read, "Children, thank you for the daily necessities. These eggs can all hatch into chicks. If you need anything in the future, feel free to contact us. Please also stay safe and take good care of yourselves." Looking at the warm words on the note, Uncle Wang and Aunt Darcy felt a surge of warmth in their hearts, and so did we. Because in this cold apocalypse, the kindness between people was like a beam of light, illuminating the road ahead of us. On the 7th day after the zombie outbreak, mobile phones completely lost their signal, and our connection with the outside world was entirely cut off. Ben used dismantled wooden boards and light bulbs to successfully make an incubator, and we placed the eggs we had traded for into it, arranging for round-the-clock supervision. Jacob and I stayed busy in the backyard, organizing the vegetable beds more neatly and turning over the soil again to ensure the seeds could sprout smoothly, while Beatrice and Cecilia often came to help, and Hashim was responsible for watering and fertilizing the vegetables. As the days passed, our lives gradually got back on track. During the day, we took care of the vegetable beds and watched over the eggs, occasionally using the drone to check the situation outside. And at night, we sat together, sharing stories or reading books borrowed from the library to ease the pressure brought by the apocalypse. Jacob always silently helped me with my work. When I organized the vegetable beds, he helped me move water and cement bricks. When I turned the soil and planted vegetables, he watered and fertilized them. When I checked the defensive facilities, he followed by my side, handing me tools and keeping watch. He didn't talk much, but his gaze always followed me. And sometimes his looks made me feel so embarrassed that I made mistakes, like digging up holes he had just finished, or ruining several potato sprouts. Whenever that happened, he would just smile gently and quietly redo the holes and remove the damaged potatoes. Cecilia seemed to notice something and would sometimes deliberately find excuses to pull Jacob away. But before long, he would always return to my side and continue helping me. I understood his feelings clearly, and I also felt something different toward him. In this panic-filled apocalypse, he was the first person to unconditionally believe in me, support me, and protect me. And being with him always made me feel safe and grounded, though I knew that this was not the time for romance and that surviving came first. On the 26th day after the zombie outbreak, the weather became increasingly abnormal. In past years, late July was unbearably hot, with high temperatures both day and night. But now daytime temperatures could exceed 40 degrees Celsius, while nighttime temperatures dropped to just a few degrees, creating an extreme difference between day and night. Under our careful care, the eggs in the incubator finally began to hatch, and more than 20 eggs ultimately produced 15 chicks. The newly hatched chicks were extremely fragile and afraid of the cold, so we quickly moved them into wash basins, warmed them with light bulbs, and arranged round-the-clock supervision. At the same time, the first batch of fast-growing Chinese cabbage I planted in the vegetable beds had matured. And we harvested more than 20 heads, keeping half for ourselves and sending the other half by drone to Uncle Wang and Aunt Darcy at the cafeteria. They were very happy to receive the cabbage and sent us a piece of frozen pork and several chunks of ginger in return. That evening, we used the pork and cabbage to cook a steaming pot of cabbage and pork soup. And as we drank the delicious broth and felt the warmth of our companions around us, I realized that even in the apocalypse, happiness could still exist. In the days that followed, our vegetable beds continued to yield baby cabbage, radishes, and other vegetables. The chicks gradually grew up and started laying eggs, and our lives became fuller and more hopeful. We also established a stable exchange relationship with Uncle Wang and Aunt Darcy, sending them vegetables and fruit while they sent us eggs and meat, and occasionally even homemade steamed buns and flatbreads. Through the drone, we learned that there were other survivors at the school, though most of them stayed hidden in dormitories and did not dare come out. And we neither contacted them nor were disturbed by them, as everyone maintained a tacit distance while struggling to survive. On the 57th day after the outbreak, the abnormal weather proved too much for many people. Beatrice, Cecilia, and Hashim fell ill one after another, with fever, coughing, and diarrhea. So we quickly isolated them and gave them the cold and gastrointestinal medicine we had stockpiled. The remaining three of us, Jacob, Ben, and I, not only had to handle daily shifts, tend the vegetables, and watch over the chicks, but also take care of the sick, and the pressure instantly multiplied. Worse still, a group of uninvited guests appeared at the school. 9 days earlier, Ben's drone spotted a large van driving into the campus, from which 3 or 4 heavily tattooed men carrying steel pipes and machetes got out and tried to pry open the supermarket door, before wandering around the cafeteria and finally leaving in frustration. 3 days ago, the van returned and drove straight to the dormitory area, where they pushed several trembling people out of the vehicle as bait to attract nearby zombies, then rushed into the dormitory buildings to loot supplies after the zombies were drawn away. Through the drone, we saw that the same tattooed men were among them, and they were extremely ruthless, slashing anyone who resisted, though fortunately, they left in a hurry for unknown reasons before reaching the boys' dormitories. "They'll definitely come back," Jacob said grimly, "and next time, they'll be better prepared, so we must get ready." I nodded, knowing that with our limited manpower, direct confrontation was impossible, and suggested contacting the allied group in the boys' dormitories to fight together. Everyone agreed, and Ben flew the drone carrying our alliance letter to the boys' dormitory balcony, where a lookout took the letter, read it, and soon returned with a reply agreeing to the alliance and detailing their plan. When the van returned, we would first use drones to lure zombies and surround them, while they handled the frontal attack, and we guarded the school gate to prevent escape. Sure enough, the very next day, the van came again and headed straight for the dormitory area, prompting Ben to attach blood-stained cloth strips to the drone and fly it around the campus to attract zombies before leading them onto the attacker's path. As soon as the men exited the dormitory building, they were surrounded by zombies, and screams, roars, and fighting sounds echoed across the campus. Once the zombies had them largely pinned down, the boys' dormitory group rushed out with homemade weapons and quickly eliminated the remaining men, after which they launched another drone with cloth strips and speakers to lure most of the zombies out of the school. Jacob and I rushed to the gate on an electric tricycle, carrying chainsaws and iron plates, quickly closing and sealing the gate with iron plates and nails. And only then did we finally relax. The school became a natural fortress where zombies and hostile outsiders could no longer enter, greatly improving our safety. The 85th day after the outbreak was Thanksgiving. We divided the chickens, eggs, and freshly harvested radishes and cabbage into 2 portions and sent them by drone to the boys' dormitory and to Uncle Wong and Aunt Darcy, receiving cookies from the dormitory group and handmade stuffed pastries from the cafeteria. That night, the 6 of us sat together, eating cookies and pastries and chatting, and even without family or a lavish meal, celebrating reunion in the apocalypse with trusted companions felt deeply satisfying. Late at night, after everyone had gone to sleep, I felt someone gently pat my arm, and when I opened my eyes, Jacob's face was right in front of me, as he gestured for silence and whispered for me to follow him. He led me to a small storage room at the end of the supermarket, pointed to the ceiling, and revealed a skylight leading directly to the roof, with moonlight pouring down into the room. After confirming the roof was safe, he handed me a folding ladder and suggested we go up to watch the moon. The night breeze blew through the skylight, carrying a chill that dispersed the heaviness in my heart. And as I carefully climbed onto the stainless steel roof, Jacob joined me, handed me a can of cola, and said softly, "Happy birthday." I froze, because today wasn't truly my birthday. I never knew my real one, having been assigned a random date during household registration. And after childhood experiences filled with punishment and longing, I had never celebrated again. Jacob admitted he saw my student records and wanted to give me some sense of ceremony, even in the apocalypse. And holding the cola brought back memories of our first meeting during freshman year, when he silently left a can of cola on my table, despite my hesitation to buy one myself. As I drank it, the sweetness spread from my mouth to my heart, and when he confessed that he had liked me since the first time he saw my resilience, saying that fighting alongside me and protecting me in the apocalypse was the luckiest thing in his life. I leaned quietly against his shoulder, under the moonlight, feeling an overwhelming sense of peace. After that night, our relationship became subtly different, though unspoken, and as days passed, our lives grew increasingly stable, with continuous harvests, expanding chicken coops, and stored preserved foods. While through the drone, we saw signs of official rescue teams in camouflage, clearing zombies in the city. On the 122nd day after the outbreak, New Year arrived, and we wore everything red we could find, pasted torn red paper as couplets. And though there were no firecrackers or reunion dinner, the 6 of us gathered together, content to welcome the new year alive. Sitting together, eating the food we cook ourselves, and talking about our hopes for the future, we managed to have a lively new year. On the 219th day after the zombie outbreak, a little after 7 in the morning, while we were still asleep, we were suddenly jolted awake by a series of loud crashes, the banging growing more and more violent, as if someone was slamming heavy objects against the school gate. We rushed to the curtains, pulled them open just a crack, and saw 3 jeeps parked outside the school, with several people wearing camouflage t-shirts getting out of the vehicles, guns in their hands, smashing at the school gate with tools. "Is anyone inside?" a man shouted through a loudspeaker. "We are official rescue personnel sent to save survivors." When the others heard the word rescue, they immediately erupted into excited cheers, and Cecilia exclaimed joyfully that we were saved. "Wait." I stopped Ben, who was about to open the gate, because something felt wrong. Why would official rescue focus only on our school, and why did their clothing and behavior not resemble regular rescue personnel at all? At that moment, the man's voice came again through the loudspeaker, asking whether there was someone inside named Lucy, and my heart sank instantly, because their target was me, which meant this was absolutely not legitimate rescue. "Don't open the door," I shouted sharply, telling everyone that there was something wrong with them, but it was already too late. Cecilia suddenly screamed at the top of her lungs that I was inside and that they should hurry up and open the door to save us. I glared at her in fury and demanded to know what she was doing, but the people outside immediately shouted for us to open the gate, saying they would take us somewhere safe. I responded that it wasn't necessary, that we were very safe here, and told them to leave. After which there was a few seconds of silence before a burst of gunfire suddenly rang out, bullets slamming into the iron gate with ear-piercing sounds and quickly punching sieve-like holes through it. The man outside changed to a vicious tone, saying that the others could stay inside, but Lucy had to come out. Otherwise they would blow up the supermarket and shoot everyone dead. Cecilia was so frightened that she burst into tears, rushing over to shove me and scream that I must have offended someone terrible, and that I should hurry out and not drag everyone else down with me. Beatrice and Hashim were also pale with fear, looking at me with terror in their eyes, and I shouted at them to wake up, telling them that these people were not rescue personnel, and that even if I went out, they would never spare the rest of them. But they said, "As long as you go out." Cecilia cried hysterically, saying they had guns and that we stood no chance, begging me to go out. The gunfire outside grew denser, the iron gate riddled with holes and on the verge of being breached. And Beatrice also spoke up, asking me to go out for everyone's sake. Looking at the companions who had once fought side by side with me, a chill spread through my heart, because at the moment of life and death, the so-called bonds of friendship proved so fragile. Just as I felt utterly disheartened, Jacob suddenly grabbed my hand and said firmly that he would go with me, that no matter who they were, he would protect me. Cecilia screamed that he was crazy and clung to Jacob's leg, shouting that they had guns and that he couldn't go. But Jacob forcefully shook her off and pressed the switch for the rolling gate. As the gate slowly lifted, several ferocious-looking men stood outside with guns in their hands, staring at me coldly, and one of them told me to go with them. Jacob and I exchanged a glance. He tightened his grip on my hand, and we walked out of the supermarket together and got into the front Jeep. The Jeep drove through the dim city streets, headlights illuminating ruins and wandering zombies, with wrecked cars, scattered corpses, and abandoned items lining the road in utter chaos. The vehicle occasionally slammed into zombies with dull thuds, but the driver never slowed down. While Jacob kept holding my hand tightly, his palms slick with sweat, even as his gaze remained resolute, and he softly told me not to be afraid, because he was there. After about half an hour, the Jeep suddenly braked hard, and we saw a convoy blocking the road ahead. prompting the two men in the front seats to grab their guns, shouted us to get into the rear vehicle, and jump out to open fire on the opposing convoy. Gunfire erupted on both sides, and when the back door was yanked open, a man pointed a gun at us and ordered us to get out and follow him. But my instincts screamed that we absolutely could not go with him. I tugged on Jacob's hand and shook my head slightly, and he immediately understood, gripping my hand tightly and telling the man that we were not getting out. The man's face darkened as he snarled for us not to push our luck. But Jacob spread his arms in front of me and said that if we were going, we would go together. Otherwise, not at all. At that moment, a zombie suddenly burst out from nearby rubble and bit into the man's neck, drawing a scream as blood sprayed everywhere, and Jacob reacted instantly, kicking both the man and the zombie out of the vehicle and slamming the door shut. The smell of blood drove the surrounding zombies into a frenzy as they swarmed toward the Jeep, and one of them forced its way in through the front door, lunging at us, with jaws snapping and sharp teeth bared. "Watch out!" Jacob shoved me aside and braced his arm against the zombie's shoulder, and I lunged forward, using all my strength to press against its chest, until together we finally forced it out and slammed the door shut. Panting heavily with my heart pounding, I suddenly noticed a deep scratch on Jacob's arm, blood seeping out, and when I cried out that he was injured, his face went pale as he stepped back and told me not to touch him because it could be contagious. I rushed forward and hugged him tightly, refusing to let go, saying that I wouldn't let him turn into a zombie, and that there had to be a way, as tears fell from his eyes, and he choked out that if he didn't say it now, he'd never get the chance. He confessed that he had liked me since the first time he saw me in freshman year, that the 219 days spent with me were the happiest of his life, and that if he really turned into a zombie, I had to live on and see the world return to normal for him. As he unbuckled his seatbelt and tried to jump out of the car, I clung to him desperately, refusing to let him go, and at that critical moment, the rear door was pulled open by a stern middle-aged woman in a white lab coat. She looked at the wound on Jacob's arm, confirmed he had been scratched, then pulled me out of the car and told Jacob to get out as well, saying she had a way to save him. She led us to a van filled with medical equipment and drugs like a mobile laboratory, seated Jacob, prepared syringes and a centrifuge, and even drew a tube of my blood for separation. When I asked what she was doing and why my blood mattered, she introduced herself as Professor Shu, a state-appointed pathology expert, and explained that the Z virus originated from a biological research institute in A City, whose director colluded with overseas terrorist organizations to implant the virus into test volunteers, triggering the outbreak. She revealed that I was the only test subject whose virus never activated, and that my body had produced antibodies, which was why those people were trying to capture me to extract them and control the world. As she injected the separated plasma into Jacob's arm, she confirmed that my blood could neutralize the virus and prevent infection, and that with further treatment at the shelter, he would recover. Overwhelmed with emotion, I agreed without hesitation to cooperate fully to end the apocalypse, while Jacob held my hand tightly and promised to stay by my side. After an hour's drive, we reached a heavily guarded shelter converted from an abandoned factory, where Jacob was treated and confirmed virus-free, while I was taken to the lab to help extract antibodies and develop a vaccine. On the 220th day after the outbreak, after a night of nonstop work, the first batch of Z virus vaccines was completed and administered throughout the shelter. By the 245th day, survivors nationwide had been vaccinated, fear of infection vanished, and cleanup and reconstruction began. And on the 314th day, the last zombie was eliminated, bringing the nearly year-long apocalypse to an end. A month after order was restored, school reopened, we returned from the shelter, apologies were offered and accepted, paths diverged, and Jacob and I finally made our relationship official, studying, planning, and walking toward the future together. He suddenly handed me a can of cola, smiling as he said, "Happy birthday." I froze for a moment, before remembering that today was the birthday listed on my ID card. "Why did you buy me cola again?" I asked with a smile. "Because the first time I ever gave you cola, I already liked you," Jacob said, as he looked at me, his gaze gentle. "From now on, every birthday of yours, I'll give you a can of cola, for the rest of my life." I took the cola, opened it, and took a sip, the sweet taste spreading through my mouth. Sunlight streamed in through the window, falling over us, warm and beautiful.